So a couple of years ago, Nitecore came out with a light they called the EC4, and this light was supposedly going to revolutionize the flashlight industry, which hasn't really happened yet. What was so special about that light was that the entire body was die-cast as opposed to being machined, and this is something that they've implemented in a few of their newer lights, but hasn't really caught on to any of the other manufacturers yet. And that particular light, the EC4, was pretty good when it came out, but it wasn't really anything special other than the manufacturing process that it used. However, I think about a year later, this light came out, and this is the EC4GT. And the difference between this one and the previous version was this one used a D-dome LED and had a slightly different driver. And the build was slightly different, but for the most part, it was the same, just with the better LED. And at the same time they released the standard version, they also released the limited edition version. And the only difference between this and the standard version is purely the aesthetics. This version has slightly different printing on the body and it has a colored bezel, as well as much fancier packaging. But functionally they are the same. And in fact, the price, if you can still find these, is pretty much the same. I bought this for about $6 or $7 extra on Battery Junction. So, the reason I went for this one over the standard version is this one has slightly better battery life. It lasts about 30 minutes longer on turbo, which I think is pretty significant. But generally speaking, I think this light is superior to that. So thus I'm going to be reviewing this one instead of the normal EC4. So anyways, getting into it. As you can see, this packaging is much nicer than what Nitecore usually uses. Usually they use packaging that looks like it's designed to be on a store shelf, and I think it's kind of ugly. This is more of a presentation box, and it makes me a lot happier. Inside you get a whole bunch of documentation, including this entire fancy pamphlet that talks all about the light, and of course is written in fairly broken English, but I mean, it's pretty interesting. And then inside, you get the light itself. And then underneath, you get a holster. And inside of here is a lanyard, which is pretty good quality. And that's it. So, while it does come in a pretty fancy box, it actually does not have very many accessories. Just a holster and a lanyard, which are both of good quality. Oh, there it goes. Hold on a second. Every time. Here's the light. It's a solid piece of die-cast aluminum, as opposed to being machined like most lights, which is one of the main selling points of this particular light. As you can see, it's sort of the side-by-side 18650. So this does take two 18650 batteries, and they go in series. And the dimensions are about exactly 6 inches long and about 1.25 inches wide. 3.5 centimeters wide and about 15 centimeters long. So pretty standard size for a side-by-side 18650. I believe this is made out of the same aircraft-grade aluminum that pretty much every other light is made out of, although this differs from most of them in that instead of a Type 3 hard anodizing, this actually uses what they call a stoving varnish finish, which I looked that up, and it's basically like a form of spray coating. And the result is it's effectively pretty much the same as hard anodizing, although the finish is a bit different. It looks and feels a bit different. It's a bit more slippery, but it also feels a bit more thick. And it's just less evenly applied. So like right here, that's not a scratch or a dent, that's just the way that this finish has been applied. So it's not that even, it's not the best application. It's definitely not as even as like the anodizing you would find on even Nitecore's own lights. As far as the durability of the finish, though, it's pretty much exactly the same. You see I've chipped it a few times. As you can see here on the side, this limited edition version has the number out of 1,000, so they only made 1,000 of each color. So this is number 761 out of 1,000. This is the red limited edition. Then on the other side, EC4GT, Nitecore.com, this stuff. And I'm just going to say this now. I have no idea why they decided to go with red and blue for the limited edition colors. Being Nitecore with their color sort of being yellow, it would have made a lot more sense to have this bezel be yellow. Red and blue just seem kind of random, and making 1,000 of them, making them limited edition, I don't know why they did that. It's not like these are Nitecores are like super prestigious or anything. Like you have to have the limited edition version. I mean, it is cool and I'm glad I have it, but it's just kind of a random decision, I think. Starting from the bottom, as you can see, this piece here, so this is made out of die-cast aluminum like the rest. This right here, along with the bezel, these are the only two pieces of standard machined aluminum, and these are both hard anodized, and it's not the thickest coating ever. And you can see here that it uses double gold-plated springs on both ends, so that allows for both extra shock protection for the batteries as well as better conductivity, so theoretically better performance. However, you can see this is just a flat button here, and it is on there. And I don't think you can see right here, but there's a piece of plastic in there. So basically, this is actually uses physical reverse polarity protection, which is, for all intents and purposes, I think it's inferior to electrical reverse polarity protection, because with physical reverse polarity protection, since you have an actual physical piece of plastic preventing the battery from touching the positive, not only does it mean that plastic can potentially break if you're not careful with it, it just adds one more thing that can go wrong. It also means that you can't use flat top batteries. You can only use button tops, which is kind of a pain. The other thing I don't like is, as you can see here, this is threaded. And this is not anodized on the inside, by the way. This is just left as it was, and it's pretty ugly on the inside. But it's threaded here on the edges, just on the edges, so these are where the batteries go in. And this here, this aluminum piece spins separately, and if you look really closely, right there, you can see the threads that this turns. This is a really stupid system, and I hate it. It's just, it sucks to get it back on there, right? This one doesn't want to go on completely straight. It's slightly uneven, but it's also really easy to cross-thread this thing, which now I can see why they have this groove in here, because I did once cross-thread this and got it stuck, and I could not get it undone. So I just took a knife, stuck it in there, and just popped it back out. So at least that's there. Also, as you can see, it's threaded for a tripod, so that's nice. The batteries I like to use in this light are Panasonic NCR 18650Bs. These are both protected, obviously button top cells. And these just go in here in series, which is why I like to use protected batteries. If I'm going to put them in multiple cells in the light, especially in series, I think they should be protected. Also, as you can see, this piece here has a really thick silicone gasket for water sealing, which seems to work pretty well. I'll just get this thing on here. Right, so the batteries are installed. And then, lastly, you can see it has lanyard holes here, which actually it's a little bit difficult to get a lanyard in here with this knurled aluminum piece. I feel like it's going to get shredded, but it works, and it doesn't prevent the light from tail standing, which it does pretty well. It's quite stable. So as you can see moving down here, instead of being knurled, This has these kind of broad grooves with these square pieces, and they work pretty well. It could be a little bit more grippy. This light is just kind of slippery, and also the shape is a bit strange, but it's not too bad. You can see this has it has cooling fins here for the heatsink, which are vertical on this light, so it's a bit unconventional, but it's kind of cool. Mode switch. This uses an aluminum bezel, unlike the original EC4, which I think is kind of dumb because this is just a lot less tough than the steel bezel that's used on the original EC4. And they may have just done it for the limited edition version, but I think they would have been better off sticking with the thinner steel bezel, because you see, I dropped this on the concrete because, I'm just careful like that. And when it hit the concrete, it bent this. So I can no longer remove this bezel. I can remove the head assembly. So that's the reflector there. And obviously you can see there's no O-ring there, so that's nice. But I cannot actually remove the bezel from the head assembly. It's stuck on there because that got bent, so yeah. And there's a nice big, this is actually a really nice lens that they use. This is hardened mineral glass. It's double anti-reflective coating, so it's a really nice coating. Really big, smooth aluminum reflector. And this uses, what does this use? So the LED this uses is a factory de-domed Cree XPL High version 3, and this is cool white. This light only comes in cool white. Some of the advantages of this being die-cast, supposedly at least, are better heat dissipation, because this heatsink is more, I guess, integrated with the rest of the body, so the heat is supposed to disperse more evenly throughout the whole body of the light. It's supposed to be generally tougher, and which it seems pretty tough. I've dropped it a few times and it's fine, which nothing special, of course, but it seems to be pretty good. However, I do kind of question the waterproofing, because this back here is pretty well sealed. As you can see, there's an O-ring in here, but there's not actually an O-ring between the lens and the bezel. There's not a whole lot of advantages to being die-cast as opposed to being machined, so far as I can tell. I could make a whole nother video about this, but for the most part, I think it just makes this light look cooler. So let's talk about the UI and the modes now. This light has some pretty good mode spacing, I think. Low or ultra low, firefly, whatever they call this, on this light is 1 lumen, and this will last for about 380 hours or a little over 2 weeks. Next low is 50 lumens, and this will last for 25 hours. 200 lumens for 10 hours. 420 lumens for 4 hours and 45 minutes. And then 1,000 lumens for 2 hours. And then this also has, let's see, strobe, which is 1,000 lumens. Beacon mode, whatever, I'm not sure what you would call that. They call it beacon. And then it has an SOS mode, which is really slow. It's not that, you can't really tell it's saying SOS because it's so slow. But thankfully, these other modes are pretty hidden in the UI, so they don't get in your way. One of the nice things about this light that I really, really like is not only does it have really long run times, but it is fully current controlled. So basically, no matter what the battery level is, it's going to stay the same brightness all the way until it just dies. And that it does. I've run the batteries completely out on this, and it stays at exactly the same brightness level until the batteries are dead, and then it just dies completely. The one caveat is this does, at least Nitecore says it has, an intelligent temperature control system, an ITC, which I've seen videos of people testing it on the original EC4, and basically as the light gets hotter, it'll adjust the output to keep it from overheating. And in my experience, this light does not get very hot. It does get warm, but it doesn't quite drop enough to kill the heat, so you're still going to notice the heat, and it's still going to build up over time. So while I can't definitively say whether or not it's there on this particular light, I think it probably is, but it could be a little more noticeable. I think they could drop the output a little bit more to cool it down a bit more. But it's not bad. This heats up. This has really good heat performance. So the UI on this light, I actually really like. It's one of my favorite UIs. It's a little quirky though. As you can see, this just uses 2 buttons. This is completely electronically controlled. There's no physical analog switches here. So it also has no physical lockout because of this system here. So it has a pretty high standby drain. I believe it'll take about 2 or 3 months to drain your batteries. I don't know exactly how much it does, but it does have a pretty high standby drain, and there's really no way around that. So that is the main disadvantage of this UI, but it is a really nice UI. So this bottom button here is for power, so this is just a simple on and off, tap for on and off. While it's on, you can press this top button here to cycle through the different modes. While the light is off, if you press and hold the bottom, it'll go automatically to firefly mode. While it's off, if you press and hold the top button, it'll go automatically to turbo. And while it's off, if you double tap, it'll go to strobe. While the light is on, if you press and hold, it'll go to strobe. Press and hold again, it'll go into beacon. Press and hold again, it'll go into SOS. And from any of these modes, you can turn it off like normal, and it'll turn on in the last mode you were using before that. Or you can just tap the top mode button, and it'll return to normal lighting. While it's off, if you press the top button, it'll show how much battery you have left, and it blinks 3 times. So if it blinks 3 times, it means you have 80% or more. If it blinks twice, it means you have 50% or more. And if it blinks once, you have less than 50%. Finally, if you press and hold the 2 buttons together for 3 seconds, it'll flash, and then it will be locked. And none of the buttons will do anything. And you press and hold both for about 1.5 seconds to unlock it. While the light is on, if you press and hold the power button to turn it off, it'll enter what they call standby mode, where it'll function normally, but this light will blink. So you'll be able to find it in the dark, so that's nice. So, I really like this UI. I think it's really intuitive, and it's just easy to use. It's just very easy to figure out the first time, and it's very easy to get where you want to go. However, the one problem I have with it is this battery indicator does cause a few problems, because while it's in this battery indication mode, the way they've programmed it, it's like the light thinks it's in a different mode, right? So if you press this and you press the power button, it stops the battery indicator, but it doesn't turn the light on. And while it's blinking and you press the top button, it'll do the same thing. But for example, if you try to get to strobe from off and it's blinking and you press it again, so if you're not quite fast enough, like that, then you're not going to be able to get into strobe. It's not that complicated, but sometimes it does happen. And sometimes too, you're just trying to turn the light on, you accidentally press the wrong button, and then it's annoying. So there is that, but for the most part, I really like this UI. It works really well. So this gives you a pretty good view of what the beam pattern actually is like. Now this light obviously uses a de-domed XPL high LED, and this is cool white, which I would definitely prefer neutral white, but I don't have a choice. Nitecore made this light really focused, and when you look at this beam on a wall, it's actually really tiny. In fact, if you look straight down, the body of the light itself pretty much always covers the hot spot. That's how concentrated it is. And they claim this has a beam distance of, 475 meters, or like almost 5,700 candela, so it is really concentrated. As you can see, so you have this really concentrated hotspot, and then you have this actually really nice and smooth spill around it that has a very defined cutoff, and then you have a corona around it, which is actually pretty big. And normally I think a lot of people think this is a bad thing, but I actually really like this particular beam pattern because it allows it to throw really far without losing more normal functionality. So this is one of the few throwy lights that I actually think just works well for more or less general purpose use. And even right here where I'm on low mode, this is 50 lumens, and this will throw for a pretty decent distance actually. So it is quite a good compact thrower if you're looking for one in this size. So overall, I actually really like this light. I think it's really excellent. There's very little bad I have to say about it. I don't like the aluminum bezel, and I think it's just kind of a poor decision, especially when the old one had the steel bezel. And I think this, I guess, what is this? I don't even know what this is technically called, but I think this system here for, inserting the batteries and closing the light is just really kind of a pain in the butt. It doesn't work very well. But other than that, I really like this light. I really like the UI. The performance is excellent. It has really good beam pattern. It has pretty good tint, acknowledging, of course, that it is a cool white. It's current controlled. It has great heat management. It has a great lens, even very scratch resistant. Overall, I really don't have anything bad to say about this light. Now this goes for $60 if you're buying the standard version, and that will have just a black bezel, and I think this part right here just says Nitecore, and it also has the boring packaging. Or if you can find any of these left, I think they'll go for as much as like $80, but I got this for $67, I think, on Battery Junction. And if I can find any limited editions, I'll put a link, but I don't think there's really any reason to get the limited edition version. And I would definitely get this over the standard version of the EC4 because I think this outdoes it in pretty much every way, except for the bezel, of course. But light performance, 30 minutes more on turbo is pretty significant, I think. Not that you're going to use turbo for 2 hours straight, but it just means better battery life across the board. And I think what Nitecore is doing with the die-cast technology is interesting. It's something I would like to see more of. I know they've come out with a few interesting lights, like the EC9, I think. Oh, I can't remember what they call it, but it's sort of like a cross between this and the SRT7. Oh, it's the SRT9, and so it's a die-cast light with the motoring and multicolor LEDs, so that's pretty interesting. I would like to get my hands on one of those, but obviously it doesn't seem like they're pushing it as hard as they could, and it doesn't seem like any of the other flashlight companies are really interested in this. And I think it's cool, but it's not like, a major revolution in lighting technology or anything than that. I think it's a nice thing to have. And I think this is definitely a nice light. So, who would I recommend this for? Someone who wants a compact throwing light with a lot of features. That's definitely what this is. It's compact. It does a lot. It has a lot of modes and features. It's designed very well. I just think it's a very innovative, forward-thinking light, and I just really like it. And if you're like a flashlight collector at all, or a modder looking for something, a more interesting platform, I would highly recommend this because I think it's awesome. All right, so that was me dropping the light. That was my attempt at making a shorter video that wasn't an hour long like the last one I filmed. So please, tell me what you think. If you liked it, like it, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you didn't like it, then, you can just be your hateful self, I guess. If you have any comments or suggestions or anything else like that, please tell me. And I have nothing else to say, so I won't waste any more memory on my camera.